13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. This edition, we have Dr. Barre Lando from Alfa Vedic joining us for an interview. And as always, I have Adam here with me. Adam, how are you?
Energized. A little overwhelmed with information in an incredibly wisdomatically good way. So I'm good, Bill. How are you doing?
Amazing. This was one of those interviews where I could see, like we have a camera on during Zoom and I could just look at my jaw is dropped. It's just dropping. It's just open a lot of the time. I had to, make a conscious effort to keep it closed because some of the things that we talk about, it's super, super interesting. So you guys will hear all about that in the intro or in the interview. But I came across Dr. Barre relatively recently, I'd say in the last 3 years. And with Alfa Vedic, what they do a lot, but in regards to their supplement line, I actually joined their co-op. They have a co-op on Patreon. And so I'm a huge fan of their supplements. I use them on a daily basis. They're actually on the Find Your Tribe page on the website. So we've had them featured on the website since I had it redesigned back in September. And it's just something that there's no affiliate links between us. And I just think, free advertising because it's a great company. And I like sharing these, pearls of wisdom with the listeners. And Alfa Vedic is definitely one of those places where lots of pearls can be found. So the episode, the interview was fantastic. But besides that, before Adam and I hopped on to record this intro, I stepped outside and I found a envelope from Blake Art. You remember Blake Art? He was on episode 80 with simulation assumptionism. So he made us some stickers. I talked about the stickers in the last intro. Now I'm happy to report I have said stickers. We are progressing towards our promise of making stickers available. So they will be up on the website very soon for purchase, but I got them physically. And Adam was here to see the unboxing of them. So that was special.
No, they look amazing. It's all the new logo art. So I hope eventually one of those makes it this way in an envelope. I will be very selfish in my requests.
I can make that happen. And so, exciting news. Matt, Blake Art is continuing to work on the website. We're going to come out with some listener submission package to help facilitate the more open aspect, the open source aspect of this project, to help encourage others to go out and have these conversations and hopefully record them and send them in, and we can turn them into an episode and kind of memorialize even more wisdom into the annals of 13 questions. And other things that you can find on the website, which you may or may not find of interest, is the Question 3 book catalog, a bio page, we
finally reached a order of magnitude to where it is a legitimate list and you can get lost in it. It's probably more than you will already read in your lifetime, but you are going to find some nuggets in there. And it's fascinating to see the repetitiousness of it in a few of the books that seem to be influential among our guests that I never would have thought were influential. So if you are looking to, increase your wisdom isn't the right word. But if you are looking for some meaningful, deep thinking books, this is a good repository.
And they're all conveniently linked also for you to purchase a physical and or sonic copy of said book. So that's super convenient too.
Support yourself, and while doing so, you can also support 13 Questions.
Yes, we are a value for value podcast. This is not supposed to be a free product. So with that being said, I guess maybe we can move into the gratitude jingle.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
Well, I guess I shall start this off, Bill. My gratitude, I guess, is for the ability to change patterns and identify patterns, or more specifically, finding recently some patterns that work better for myself. Life gets complicated between personal life, work, finding the energy, the right mindset, the right timing to do things, to balance all the things, plus the surprises of life, the weather, the headaches, whatever the randomness is. But being able to find timing and situating yourself into the right circumstance to make those situations more successful, I'm grateful for. I've been trying to record audio for a long time, and it's some of the most difficult audio that I've had to record and to do it because of the enunciation and the types of words and the time period that it was written in. It's for an audiobook. And to find, you have to have a lot of mental concentration and then find the time and to sit down and do it. And to do that consistently has just been incredibly difficult to line all those up. And it seems like the simplest thing, but now I've started to fine tune what time do I realistically need to make it into bed, to wake up at a certain time that I can spend doing this. And I've noticed that when I'm productive at something, it makes me feel better and it starts my day off better. And so, I tried to see if I could make this work as a morning thing. And so now through trying this for, like a month and going into this and then finding that even when I sit down and say, I'm going to sit down for 4 hours and do this. Well, now that doesn't work either because I can't keep my mind sharp and focused for that period of time. Like anything else, you need to get up and you need to take a break, you need to rest. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm at about, 40 minutes solid where I can get my concentration in and I know I've got a good work. So, the idea, let's try to do this every day. And, just finding that that's something I can work into my schedule and to benefit me. But it took lining all these other things up and to try to figure out how to do it. And, it's having the gratitude and being grateful that you can find efficient ways to make room for things that need to be done. Even if it doesn't seem possible, there's always a little room to squeeze out. And, for whatever that's worth, I'm grateful that I can utilize that to my advantage.
Yeah, dude. Efficiency is key. Like if you're not, and part of being efficient is being organized, right? So, and that's exactly what you're doing, right? It's trying to figure out how to fit this thing that you want into your schedule. And that's something I can go ahead.
And it feels weird to say, but as I get older, after work, my brain is just, fried in a completely different sort of way where coming home from work and, working on something that I'm concentrating with full, clarity and having to have the details, down. It's, I don't know. It's, thank God for editing. That's my other gratitude.
Well, it's 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 a good you're entering flow state, right? You're finding your optimum way to function, right? And it's always a work in progress. So
Yeah. Well, isn't that weird? Because so much of what our flow state is devoted into putting food on our plate. It's no longer the creative, the things that we're doing are, for the classical survival. So yeah, it is kind of weird because the flow state is interrupted. That energy has to be given to something else. And if you don't have passion for your job, then, that's something you need to advance in, as importantly, because that allows your spiritual side to advance. So
you know,
yeah,
mhm.
it's just one of the, go on, Bill. You've confused me.
No, I think you mentioned that our I want to touch on something here. Our primal need is to put food on the table. You think you used that phrase?
Well, yeah, survive, like I see a lot of the ills of the world because of the lack of that. We're not getting eaten by wolves and we're not dying of starvation generally, in the middle of the winter or, from the environment. So that's a good thing. But we have lots of shoulder issues and, we have lots of feet issues. Well, why? Well, we're not in the same environment. We have lots more, infection issues. Well, we're living in contained houses and spaces and we have lower immune systems. Well, being in the forest, being around natural terpenes, increases your immune system. So we're no longer just in these normal things that were stressors on us, but, would alleviate all these other ills and problems. And, you're not going to be vitamin deficient if you're, living outdoors. If you're not fully, if you're not covered in clothing head to foot, you're not going to have the same foot issues if you're not permanently casting your feet, But at the same time, more people are going to die of an infection from getting a foot cut. So it's, yeah, I spent a lot of time viewing the world from that weird primal type of way, that there's some needs and, we're still trying to fulfill them. And we just got to find in this new environment the best way to fulfill those needs, in a modern primal way.
I agree. Like there are needs that need to be fulfilled, but I was reading a chapter in Reality Transurfing this morning, and I took some notes about this very thing. And I guess I'll just kind of read it and tie it back into our conversation. But to frame this in the context of our fundamental need, right? So to begin with, anything that is new will eventually become treated as mundane. The heart mind makes up games to combat boredom. So case in point, for example, like professions, our jobs are really just adults at play, right? So this brings us to the next point. The fundamental need of every being isn't to put food on the table as many of us think it is, and what we've been taught to believe, because I thought this way up until I read this, but according to Vadim, it is the fundamental need of every living being is the ability to independently manage our own lives, and control our reality. And so
it's essentially survival. It is surviving. We talked about this on, the last episode about it's not the destination, it's the journey. And that is surviving. Whatever the world is, it's how people survive, how they make it through. That is where you will find your happiness. The Buddha says life is suffering. You listen to people during World War II in Nazi Germany and in terrible war situations and war zones or places, soldiers. And you hear stories about, even in some of the most horrific carnage, they had some of the best, most joyful time of their life with other people, with community, because up against that other juxtaposition, I mean, everything just had a different view, and it was memorable and it was important. And so, there is something about how you survive, not just putting the food on the table.
Right. And yeah, so what exists really is going back to my notes, this might heavily paraphrased from the book, but the insatiable thirst to control one's own reality is what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with boredom. Boredom isn't really something that exists because the heart and the brain will make up a game to
Absolutely.
model controllable reality. And
We
this,
talked about it in the episode, but I mean, right now, if you just take America, most people can go and get fresh water. They can wash their hands. They can get potable water that's easy to drink anywhere in a public restroom. You can go and get salt. One of the most valuable things in antiquity is there, available for free at a McDonald's. You know, you can go and buy an animal that has been slaughtered with cultured cheese and, you know, wheat that has been grown. And yeah, it might be processed, but that thing only cost you $1 and it was delivered to you in like 3 minutes. You know, these things would be magical and completely unheard of. And we take it for complete granted. So back to that survival, instead of having to do all the things to have that experience of ingesting that prepared meal in that way, has been made so easy by our perception of the world now that all the ills around us, a lot of them, I think you're right. It is that gamification of life, you know, that if you don't see the problems, you know, or the idea, if you have a hammer, everything's a nail. What if there's no nails? Well, the hammer still has to swing.
Right. I like that you brought up, or that you called it magical, because I mean, that's alchemy and magic that goes hand in hand, and kind of looking for a segue into my gratitude, I guess, which is about moldavite. Moldavite is another mineral, kind of like shungite. We talk a lot about shungite, have talked a lot about shungite on the show before. So I have, it's kind of a big announcement, actually. I have retired my shungite pendant that we got from Mystical Wares.
What happened to it?
It's I used to wear this, 24/7. I'd sleep with it. I'd just take it off to go into the shower, right? But I have replaced it with, okay. So number one, I'll explain why my thought process behind getting rid of, or not getting rid of, but just choosing not to wear the shungite is because I'm surrounded by shungite in my house. It is in every plant pot, every house plant that I have, which is a lot, and it's on the dog's collar. I've got a hunk of it sitting on my computer, stand or the tower, and it's basically, unless I leave the house, I really don't need to have my shungite with me. And the reason being, for anybody new that's listening, shungite, one of the properties is it does mitigate EMF, harmful EMF radiation. So there's plenty of other metaphysical properties, just like there are with any other stones, such as moldavite, which I just acquired today. Actually, it showed up in the mail. I'm getting all sorts of interesting things in the mail today. And so yeah, I've switched my necklace from the shungite to the moldavite. And a little bit of background on moldavite: it is a space rock, kind of just like shungite, and there are some connections to the Holy Grail and moldavite, which is very interesting if you want to look into it. I'm just starting the research myself, but one of the aspects that I kind of found interesting is this stone is to kind of, you ever get the feeling of you don't you ever get the feeling of like, beam me up, Scotty, like get me out of here, I'm not, like, this world is crazy, and kind of like maybe not belonging so much. What this moldavite is said to do is just to kind of make you feel like you're at home, right? That not homesick, so to speak. And I think that's nice. I think that after our conversation with Bear and talking about the I am and extrapolating that to where we all come from, that I think that moldavite's pretty powerful little nugget to have around. So that's what I'm grateful for, really.
So it's a natural remedy for imposter syndrome.
Pretty much. That's a good way to put it. Way less words than I just used to describe it.
We're gonna have Bill's line of moldavite.
Dude, this a little bit more expensive than Shungite. So maybe in a few, I want to say an alternate timeline because anything's possible, but yeah, we'll see. Definitely won't be something that we'll be offering through the show's merch store anytime soon. Shungite, on the other hand, could be, but we'll talk about that when we cross that bridge. So this episode was, like I said, my jaw was on the floor half the time, and I had to pick it up. So I guess with that, I'm just super excited to share the interview with everybody, and hit us up on the socials, give us some feedback. Adam, what do you think?
I love this episode. It was great. It was simple. It was in the way that Einstein summed up a great deal of relativity with E equals mc squared. There's some very simplistic views and pieces of knowledge that, I don't know, allowed me to frame the world very simply, kind of put my, refocused my lens in a good way, in that way of like, where am I in the world? How am I thinking in the world? What is my place? How should I be? Just these in generals, but when it comes to very serious things that, his wisdom makes it very clear how to do that stuff. So I know I'm speaking in circles here. We'll dive into the episode. It'll make a lot more sense once you get to it. Thank you guys for joining us, and enjoy the episode with our guest.
Yep. And with that, this is 13 Questions with Dr. Barre Lando. All right, we'll jump right into the first question then. What was the best advice ever given to you, and would you modify it at all today?
Best advice. Interesting one. So one of my mentors when I was in early adult life, and now this may not seem very deep to most people, but if you knew this individual, you would understand where he was coming from. And basically, he said, it's got to grow corn. And by that, this was a person who was from a different culture. And also, we had an interesting time together. I did not seek him out. He actually sought me out. He was in his 90s when I was about early 30s. And he was chosen at birth within his culture to follow the path of medicine, we'll say. And medicine in that culture was not just taking plant medicines and things to, help heal your body, but it was to really break, let's just say, all your conceptions of who you think you are, what you think the world is about. And he was trained from birth in a very severe and rigorous training, because that's the way they did it back in those days, to be able to see through the cracks himself. But it was very much different than a new agey kind of concept or what we think of as metaphysics, because they're very practical in that culture. And as he was leading me through many experiences over a course of a year, and it was the last year of his life, he knew it was, not because he was sickly, but he just knew he was done. And he took me on as his last project. He did that because in the course of our time together, I found out that through him, because he regressed me through different experiences. This is very personal, by the way, and I don't usually get into a lot of these things. But he regressed me through some very vivid experiences that helped me recall in very three-dimensional experience, not, vague, making anything up, of things that we had done at different times and things that we shared in common as, relative to those times. It did incorporate a lot of the things I've been involved with this time. And at that point in my life, I was in emergency medicine for about 5 years and had just finished retraining in naturopathic college and chiropractic college. And then I was learning, a lot of things from different modalities, German microbiology and, hands-on things, Chinese medicine, anyway, a lot of different things. And so I was embarking on opening up my first private practice, where now I was going to be a physician private practice, and incorporating all the things I had learned, including, some good things I learned from conventional medicine. Wasn't all bad. And, in emergency medicine, it does have some efficacy. So as he, and I got together that year, it was, of course, divine timing that he prepared me with, certain recollections, and also helping me to have more of a clear understanding of what I was doing in the first place. And so that brings us back maybe full circle to what the heck did he mean by it's got to grow corn? Again, he's very pragmatic and grounded man, and they weren't into woo-woo stuff at all. And the experiences I had with them are anything but woo-woo, even though they were very extraordinary and changed me forever as far as how I looked at the world. I had a few things on the tip of my tongue going into that experience, but he just really kind of broke a lot of things wide open. But his admonishment when he told me that was, look, this is useless unless you can apply this for a real purpose. And part of his message to me was, this is not for you to experience phenomena for the heck of it. It's about so that you can ply your trade a lot more effectively and understand what your real role is. So I hope that answers your question a bit.
Absolutely. And just by judging, going off of the name Alfa Vedic, does it ties into Ayurvedic in some way, I'm assuming? So I'm just making inferences here. So was your mentor, was he from India?
No, Native American.
Okay.
Which I actually have more of an affinity for. Just my temperament is more aligned with that culture. I'm very happy with the culture I'm born into. I'm not, not one that seeks to be, a member of something that, isn't my experience this time around. That just happened to fall in my lap. And at the same time, I do have more of an affinity because of where I grew up in a natural setting with, roaming around the hills, finding arrowheads. And, it was really, let's just say, imprinted in the area that I grew up with. So that resonated with me more strongly than people that would maybe travel to the East, to find their guru in India or some such thing.
For sure, that makes complete sense. That we were talking a little bit before the interview, and just a little synchro. Darren, the progenitor, I guess that's the right term for this podcast, is First Nations Ojibwe. Not that that matters or anything. It's just something to take notice of, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Alfa Vedic is, does connote, certain meanings from, those, more metaphysical cultures in the East. And then we spelled a little bit differently, connoting more of first in line and sort of a temperament that Alpha is portrays, that I think is a polarity that maybe is sorely lacking in our culture these days.
Which is another reason why I was drawn to 13 Questions, because it does bring up the topic of masculinity, which is something that in my opinion is kind of under attack at this point. And as a host, what I'm seeing as I do this project is it's becoming more of an how do I say this, a qualitative anthropological study on manhood. So it's just super interesting that that we were able to tie those two things together.
Great.
All right. Question number 2. What do you choose to willfully ignore?
Authority. That was an easy one. I don't believe, and I never have, and it's gotten me into a lot of trouble in my life. I have always, for what it's worth, rebelled against any earthly source that claims authority over me in any way. It just went against my grain from childhood to present time. And it did shape a lot of my decisions in life, and was also, again, at the bottom of a lot of trouble that I constantly got into from childhood to present day. I just, my belief is that we are all here as sovereigns, and anybody who claims authority is not only pretentious, but just outrageous to make such a claim. And that led me into a lot of legal studies, later in life. One of my my undergraduate degrees was pre-law along with pre-med. And but then that background, because I didn't choose that as my vocation ultimately, it did give me a little bit of a background to get into more studies in law later on that are still really a big part of my life.
Yeah, authority. 100. To me, that speaks to like asking permission, right? So, would you say that it's a fair statement that the only person that we really need to ask permission to do anything is from ourselves, as long as we're not harming another being?
I would absolutely agree with that, and I'm of the belief, just through my own experience, of the principle of I am. And I am, of course, has many levels of throughout the electronic planes, we'll call, as far as our existence on this plane in the first place. So you have the universal I am, which is, you can call it what you want, the spirit that moves through all things. You can call it God. But then I am as an individualization, which I believe we all are from that same source. We have been given the prerogative to create within our little coordinate of consciousness, and nobody else has any say about what we do. And of course, if you're in that understanding, you also realize that there's nothing that would lead you in any way to be inclined to encroach on other people or do things that would harm any other part of life. But I am does, I believe that when you state I am, then you are stating your godhood in that particular coordinate of consciousness. And that's our job. That's our responsibility. That is not anything arrogant to say. It is actually arrogant to deny that, I believe. So, we are here, I believe, to add to that universal consciousness. Otherwise, why would consciousness embody into a simulation, of the sorts that we're in? And why would it individualize in the many forms and perspectives in the first place? So we're here on a mission, and I've always embraced that mission. I've always had a passion for it. I still do. And I take it very seriously if somebody assumes that they can tell me what to do on any level. And in the practice of medicine, we have electronic overlays that have been created in past cultures by different root races that did not draw their line in the sand. And therefore, these collective karmic fields, we can call them, do pass on generationally, even much the same as our own baggage that we tend to, drag into lifetime after lifetime. And we can identify these as a source of a lot of what we identify as disease, which isn't disease at all. It's just a biological expression of, let's just say sin, which is, literally defined as falling short of. And in my understanding, falling short means to not express your full divinity.
I love that you brought up that you've been a prerogative to create. I think that creation, that is a divine mandate from God. When God made Adam, he told him to procreate and populate the earth, right? Well, I mean, we're procreating co-creation, right? So the fact that, I mean, I don't know, maybe people don't realize why they feel unfulfilled. Maybe it's because they're not creating anything. We're not taking advantage of the gift that we're given. And I think that and I'm finding fulfillment in that in my life by, through this podcast and creating this and sharing it with the world. And before that, and I don't like to talk about myself, but I was real lacking an outlet, right? So I think that just to emphasize I just think that it's important to emphasize that creating anything is holy, right?
Well, I like what you said there about grasping it, because when you're talking about the I am, this takes me to like the Einstein idea that the ultimate answer is going to be just a very simple equation. And that's the type of thing that, how can you live your life? Well, the idea of I am, like, answers those questions. You would not hurt yourself. How would you, it puts you in all these other situations of frame of thought that really does kind of mold. And it's very simple. It's 2 words, 2 thoughts that are very easy that a child can get. As soon as you have self, then, so I don't know, that's a very beautiful thing, because in a world where you can't quite grasp, how you're supposed to be, that's a very simple core thing that you can understand, you can feel. It's a core piece of wisdom.
Yeah, and it's the oldest piece of wisdom on this plane, and it's been with us forever, and all the adepts of all times have tried to teach us that. And of course, what the would-be controllers are always attempting to do is to have us define ourselves to limit I am. We've all had many experiences in life. I don't ever say I am a husband, I am a doctor, I am an athlete. We all say things like that, but I've learned that whenever we qualify I am, now you are greatly limiting yourself, and that has been weaponized against us in the judicial system by creating labels that not only limit our potential or just limit who we really are, but also bring us into their fictional jurisdiction. And, Bill, you were saying that I am, means we're here to create. And when we are thwarted in that creative impulse, then that becomes emotion, because creativity, of course, is only using the universal mechanics, beginning with our own thought processes to create in unlimited fashion. And that is energy and motion, we could say. And when that motion stops for any particular reason, because of our own personal inertia or by somebody trying to control our output of energy, then that is what is called emotion, stopping the motion. It's stuck emotion. It becomes crystallized. And those are all the things that we experience that make us feel less than joyous, and also end up crystallizing in our experience for all the things we don't want, and also crystallizing in our body for all the things that we blame on illness or pathogens.
So that would lead me to believe that anything that manifests in the 3D as an quote unquote illness does in fact have a correlation to maybe what we would call our emotional body or psychic body.
Yeah, we could, simplify it and say, just look at our self in a particular incarnation as 4 planes of energy, beginning with the mental, which is where, of course, we have the ability to produce thought, which is an electrical event that polarizes, creates the resonance, and then that, then filters through the astral or emotional body, if you want to think of it that way. And the emotions give the intensity and the velocity, so that polarization, beginning with the thought, then can have enough, let's just say, ability to go through the compression cycle that then filters into the etheric and eventually solidifies in what we think of as matter for the next, little frame of our experience. So emotion is a big deal. And of course, what we consider emotion, even, in Chinese medicine, we talk about, well, it's great when, we're expressing joy or happiness. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's also an emotion, and it's kind of the opposite polarity of fear, depression. So there's another level of emotion that, we seldom experience, which is not just a neutral sort of feeling, but it is that ultimate feeling of bliss that you get when you no longer are perceiving separation. And then, of course, you're as some people call it, the fulcrum between the polarities. And then now you are manipulating those polarities to create exactly what you want, rather than swinging one side or the other, with the pendulum. But emotions, if there wasn't for emotions, in fact, we're more emotional in our makeup than we are mental, because again, nothing can manifest into our experience or body unless it has that emotional content in the first place. And that's just physics. It's really not psychology or anything like that.
You mentioned pendulum, and I think it's a good term. And I'm curious, are you familiar with a book called Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zeeland?
No, sorry.
He uses pendulums to illustrate how our emotions can be, like you said, swept up in these pendulums. And these pendulums kind of, if we're not wary of them, they can prevent our flow through time, like through manifestation. And speaking on that, manifestation, how, I guess, from everything that you've just explained, where would time, how does time relate to the speed at which a thought would manifest, as opposed to something on like the 3D plane? Like, why is it faster on these etheric levels, and then it slows down as it gets to like the grosser levels of materialism?
Well, if we're talking about compressing informational fields into matter and experience and understanding how that's done, and we already mentioned that emotion gives our original thought intensity or velocity. Let's just take a practical example. Let's just say, Bill, you and I say, okay, we're going to start a business. And we have a couple business meetings, and it's sort of lackluster, and we had to try that. That might be a good idea. And there's not much behind it, versus we get together, we're on fire. We think we're going to change the world with some kind of concept, and we just can't wait to do it. You have that emotional intensity, which is going to manifest quicker, the first scenario or the second one. So just in our practical experience, and it's the thing, all this stuff is pretty easy to understand if we just observe how life works in the first place. When we have passion and, our intent is fueled by that passion and just that, the velocity that's given, by that passion, then things manifest very quickly. Time is an interesting concept, though, because this might get a little bit into more the mechanics of, waveforms, which, we won't get too deep into, but it's a dual hydraulic pump. So let's just say you have a thought, you have that electrical polarization that we're talking about. It goes through those levels. And these things can be measured, by the way, and we actually do it in certain ways. And I apply this to my medicine. So it's not just thought bubbles. So when that is initiated, then it goes through these stratifications, and picks up steam, and that becomes a waveform of a centripetal direction spin, and it actually funnels down, and the quicker or the more it gets to that pinpoint of where the data fields. And this is easy to understand too in a computer age, because all we're doing, you and I are talking with each other now because somehow there's these informational fields that are channeled through these plastic boxes, and we're seeing each other. You're on the East Coast somewhere. I'm out here in the Pacific Northwest. So we're doing this stuff all the time. But then sometimes when we talk about how things really work, within our own selves, we forget that we're the original technology in the first place, much more sophisticated with unlimited capabilities compared to, the best bank of supercomputers on the planet. There's nothing that can compare to us. So when, you have that centripetal motion, it gets quicker, more rapid, right at the point of impact, and popping into the matrix, so to speak. And that stratification, and because we're more focused on the compression cycle of creation, because we really believe that we're these physical bodies in a physical experience. And that's what we've been programmed since birth, and who knows how long before that, to believe that's all there is. Even when you have metaphysical concepts, is still, sort of an imaginary world for most people. But when we're focused that intently, then we experience that stratification as a concept of time. However, if we're equally focused or cognizant of the reverse cycle that's happening simultaneously as that spin, increases to materialize, and I hope this isn't getting too wordy, sorry. Simultaneously, that heat creates a radiation effect where the same informational fields now go up in the opposite direction, and it's a back and forth hydraulic pump that is literally creating frame after frame after frame of outpicturing in our body, outpicturing in our experience. That's why in the practice of medicine, sometimes I saw these things happen in people's bodies that couldn't possibly happen if you believe in the concept of time, because you see things instantly manifest or dematerialize. So, it was a great experience to see some of those things. So if we were now in the middle of that toroidal field, which is really what it is, if you see, the compression and then the radiation, it really has this, sorry, I'm making gestures with my hands. I know nobody can see me. It creates that model of what people think of as a toroidal field, sort of like a donut, where there's, energy going in the center and coming out and, creating this perpetual swirling. Well, that's what we're doing every time we have a thought. And every time that thought impacts and creates something and then radiates back in the other direction. So when you get the hang of it and really understand how it works, at least first intellectually, then that becomes more ingrained in your beliefs, in your emotions, and then you start experiencing time less and less and less. And it's easier to be in that mythical place of what metaphysicians call the moment.
The toroid field makes me think of establishing heart-brain coherence. And Greg Braden talks a lot about this, and Derek Condit, who we've had on the show, episode 50. If you haven't heard it, listener, go check it out. He talks about establishing heart-brain coherence, which is something that I've adopted and tried to bring onto the show. Actually, Adam and I have a segment we do in the intros, a gratitude segment where we just think of something that we're grateful for, and we talk about it just to generate that field, that toroid field that you were talking about. So, and in relation to that, to bring it back into simulation theory, like the use of, you were talking about information fields and how computers are a really good analogy to use to kind of illustrate these ideas. And we just had episode 80 with the artist formerly known as Blake Art. He did a couple logo redesigns for us, and he's kind of promoting what he's come up with as simulation assumptionism. So I love that these kind of terms and these ideas are available for us to use to kind of try to convey these messages to people, because it can be like super confusing. I mean, I'm sure, going into particle physics isn't really something that people do every day, but it helps to kind of take the hay down from the loft and make it accessible. So, which kind of brings me to the next question, in which is the book question, and just before we get to that, as far as using having a vocabulary to explain these things, I mentioned Reality Transurfing by Vadam Zeeland earlier, and I'm actually in the middle of a book club with Owen Hunt, who we've had on the show before also, and I'm finding that this book is giving me a vocabulary to use to explain in more than one way these concepts. So that's something I'm finding super helpful. So in addition to that, on our website, actually, we're cataloging every answer that every guest has given to this third question. So that makes an awesome reading list if you're looking for a good book to read. So maybe check that out, listener, if you're interested in books, or Dr. Bear, if you need a new book to read, there's tons of good stuff on there to find. But so the third question is, what book has been most influential on your life and why?
Yeah, that's an easy one too. Except it's not a single book; it's a series of books that we refer to, some of us in certain circles, as the green books, and they came out in the 30s, and you could call it the Saint Germain series. Now, there's a lot of spin-offs of that information, and Saint Germain himself admonished that that would happen, and it would be like a controlled opposition. People like Elizabeth Clare Prophet and other people that came later, just putting subtle spins to really take away from the true understanding and the resonances in those green books. So to understand the history of those books, many centuries of work goes into those. And the Theosophical Society was, the continuation of certain secret societies, and not all secret societies are evil. They had to stay underground a lot, because they would be greatly persecuted, like we're seeing in our culture coming back now, with censorship and persecution in certain ways. So that gave birth, like the Rosicrucians and different orders, and of course, in all those movements, you had co-ops and infiltrations, but that led to the Theosophical. And then you had most notably Rudolf Steiner, who took the Theosophical and moved it into the Anthroposophical. And that was an attempt to bring Eastern mysticism more into a balance with Western mind, so it could be more practical, for those of us in the West, and also greatly balance it out, because the Asian influence, although it kept a lot of truth alive over centuries, it did lead us into more seeking out-of-body experiences rather than grounding things in to be co-creators like we're supposed to be. That's the whole point of the Western Hemisphere. And so Rudolf Steiner did that. Now that prepared the way in the 30s for the Saint Germain Foundation. and or Saint Germain to bring his work. Now, my wife and myself both became involved with that early on, maybe 40 years ago or something. And there were still people that were, elderly back then. And, we were pretty young still back then. And they had walked and talked with the originators of that movement, who walked and talked with Saint Germain at the same time. And, we were able to see a lot of evidence that the concept of ascended master Saint Germain was very real. It wasn't just a belief system or some kind of new agey thing, although a lot of new agey movements were spin-offs off of that. So that gets into the work of the I Am, because that's what the green books are about. And the green books are the most profound book on waveform physics imaginable. But right in book 1, they talk about this information now has to be accessible to everybody. It can't no longer be occulted or into some complicated jargon, and they have to be put forth in a way where it's so simple a child can understand. They also say that there's 7 levels of resonance, when you read them and reread them, and there's like about 20 some odd values. I've reread them over, I don't know how many times. And each time, the inside joke is they keep changing the words because you keep getting different understanding. So you mentioned, heart and mind and creating that congruity. Well, in the Ascended Master realm, they actually have a salutation to each other, at certain levels of the depthship, where the salutation acknowledges the unification of the heart and the mind. And so that's what the green books are all about, is to understand that where your attention is at, and we've all heard this 1,000 times, but it's actually true. We even have the physics to prove it now, is, where you're going to be at. It's what you're going to be creating. It's what you're going to be experiencing. And of course, the religions of the world have done a fantastic job. And I know this because I'm a recovering Catholic and grew up in a very Latin Catholic, place. My ancestors were from the old country. I grew up with, broken English and everybody crossing themselves all the time. So in those cultures, of course, there's a whole bunch of guilt, and, you're always, saying rosaries and trying to atone for your sins. And what was very freeing about the green books is it doesn't matter if you just did the most heinous thing one moment before. As soon as you can let that go, not look right or left, and just go on with your experience. Of course, you don't want to repeat those heinous things. Otherwise, that's no good either, but you have to forget about it. And of course, that's why we come in with memory lapses in between embodiments, because, otherwise we'd be so hung up on all the things that we've done. Most of us can't get over some of the, forgive ourselves for the things this time around. So it's just very freeing. And it's just like, that really explaining deeply the physics behind why we're co-creators every single moment. We can't live in the past, can't live in the future. We got to be here right now. And as soon as you can let all those attachments go, you're home free. And it's really that simple. And of course, the Ascended Masters say, if they could just, they can't interfere with anyone's free will, they wouldn't do it, because it would rob us of our, what we're here to achieve in the first place. But they could take somebody, and within, 24 hours, you would be ascended. Ascended also is not a metaphysical term. It's a very, easy understanding when you understand the physics behind it. So those are my favorite books. And it also, later on when I went into waveform physics and everything that I enjoy now, it really explained more for my left brain to say, oh yeah, what they're saying is actually true. And it's all about the unification of the heart and mind, because they're never meant to be separate in the first place. That was never the intention. And in martial arts, my experience was very valuable, because you learn how to focus in on energy centers and bring them alive. And in the heart center, it is very easy to expand that one into a magnificent energy field, and then also blend it with this sevenfold flame in our brain structure, and to really hasten that unification of heart and mind. So it's a very visceral thing, and I've always been very visceral. That's why it was easy for me. I was always an athlete. I wasn't an intellectual, and I always rebelled against intellectualism. And even though I did a lot of book learning later on to learn the vocabularies, as you say, it was, to me, it was easy because I just did better feeling things. That's why martial arts came easy for me.
So I mentioned a little bit before the show that I've been reading a lot of Saint Germain recently. And so in my, I guess, exploration into the historical figure, if what I'm finding is true, this guy lived like, I don't know, 200 years or something. There's accounts of him being in the court of Valois in Italy, I believe, in, I don't know, 15th century or something like that. And then there's also accounts of him in the 1700s, in the royal houses of France and stuff. Like, is there anything, like, I guess I'm just asking, like, what do you know about him? Because you have more of a general, more of a direct connection than I do, just reading out of a book.
Well, I have been fortunate in that I've got a lot of information from channels within those foundations that aren't in book form or, out there for the public. So a lot of this is in the public now, but not all of it. And so Saint Germain, of course, was Shakespeare for one thing. And you understand when you get into Shakespeare that there's many levels of code written into it. And the code was written for these members within certain circles so that they could freely exchange and communicate, ideas and information. And all unknown to the general population or the royal societies of the time that might want to interfere in some way. Another in that single lifetime, he also reappeared as Francis Bacon. And Francis Bacon, there's been a lot said about him in different ways, but again, another amazing persona, all portrayed by Saint Germain. And Francis Bacon was commissioned. One of the many things he accomplished in that persona is he was commissioned by King James to rewrite the Bible, and which is the King James version. And the sole purpose, and verbatim from King James, was that he sought greater commercial control of his subjects. And there was only one person in his court that he felt was capable of the task. Saint Germain, or Francis Bacon, accepted it. And he also encoded the Bible. Of course, later on, with some computer assistance, some folks found that they broke the first level, which, just predicted certain events and everything. And they said, well, this proves it's the word of God. And in a way, they're right, but they're just not accommodating that we're all God. And Saint Germain was just more of a conscious embodiment of the Godhead. So he was capable of these sorts of things. And but there are many, many levels of encodement beneath that. And so, in fact, there's some good books out there, boy. I think Bushby, don't hold me on that, but that might be the last name of a person who wrote a book that really counts for that, and also gives you proof of the code and how some of the decoding ability comes from just illustrations that are written or on the cover of the original version of that King James Bible. So, really fun stuff. And Saint Germain, of course, was always noted for he's never seen eating food, and was just certain people noticed that he disappear and then come back again, and he never seemed to age. And we know in our field that if you look at the body on an electrical level And the way I test bodies in my laboratory assessments, it extrapolates chemistry into electricity. And we know this certain line of resistance that you can establish as the ideal. I've never seen anybody with that. But if somebody was in that state of harmonics from that electrical resistance level, which is no electrical resistance, then your body wouldn't age in the first place. You wouldn't need to eat food. You get it right from the, the atmosphere, all your nourishment. We can explain exactly how that happens, why it's possible. And when I treated people that came in with issues, serious issues, nobody ever got perfect, according to that equation, but they would always start tending in that direction. And then at that point, you'd see, their body heal and everything. So everything that Saint Germain understood was from a very advanced level of physics, but then, of course, understanding everything we've talked about already, which is a matter of unifying the heart and the mind.
That the unification of the heart and mind also recalls, in my mind at least, how religion and science have been separated, and I think that was done on purpose because in my opinion they were never supposed to be separated. The more and more I look into spirituality, the more and more it attains to like science, right? So like it's the marriage of these two things that at least I've been brought up to believe have always been separate, right? So like that Saint Germain is just super interesting to me. So
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And real science, of course, used to be called alchemy. And now we've got this scientism, which is the yang without the yin, So there's no mana, there's nothing holding it together. It brings us into that soul compression cycle of consciousness that we're talking about, which means you're not refreshing simultaneously, or at least conscious of it, so that you can refresh the next frame of your movie, into the perfect blueprint. And over time, then that lacks the mortar to hold things together in the first place, which is why we age and why our institutions crumble and everything else.
Well, and it also really speaks to just how integral we all are, because everybody kind of has to be on the same page. There is this consensus reality. These tools can be there, but unless we all understand them, then, that placebo, nocebo effect, we're feeding off of each other. So it's almost this lesson that, we have to learn to work together because we are the whole. That right back to that, I am.
I agree completely. And go ahead. Sorry.
No, please finish your thought.
Well, I was, Adam just mentioned the whole, and, we have a concept that's very trendy now, which is a great step in the right direction, I believe. And I was just going to mention this because it kind of maybe elaborates just a little bit on, the statement of alchemy and what the heck does alchemy mean? Because, we have different connotations these days. But we go from conventional medicine, which I did, and into what I thought back then was holistic medicine. So you think you're getting more to the cause of things. You're looking at the whole mind, body, spirit. And again, that's great. But what we are really into now is the age of transmutation. And in the alchemical lab, and I've got one outside my window right here, what we do is we mimic natural processes in the laboratory, with laboratory technologies. And we can go through sublimation processes with minerals, plants, and so forth, and separate, do separations and refinements and, without getting too much into it. But you're literally transforming one substance to another, to another, to another, and back full circle again. And in the process, you make very elevated, powerful medicines from minerals and plants. But more importantly, you are now becoming a conscious creator, understanding how nature's processes work. And unlike conventional science, we understand that you cannot take the creator out of the process. It's impossible. So I always get tickled whenever I see the medics and the so-called scientists out there talking about double-blind studies and peer review. It just flies in the face of reality. There's no way you can pretend that you're not in the room. You're there and you're making it all happen. So get over it. And rather than talk about, oh, that must be a placebo, which is a grand irony of all, they're kind of admitting on one hand that there's a such thing as placebo, but then never, really explaining why the heck that would, work or have any effect in the first place. So the age of transmutation means that we are now ready to be adults, understand our co-creatorship, and understand that not only is the ascension process, which is why we're here in embodiment in the first place, is transmutation of our experience, of ourselves, our understanding, all the levels of awareness. And, and in the alchemical lab, the ultimate goal is you reunify everything after this sublimation and purification process. And, then you have no restrictions on that electrical level, and you are no longer bound in the matrix because you're not focused on that compression cycle. It's really that simple. A lot of us are actually getting real glimpses of this, and the glimpses are coming more frequent. So, and then also in our own experience with things we can do on the ground in medicine and agriculture and the lab, we're proving these principles out. So beyond holistic, we are supposed to be understanding that, the elements in the ground, the microbes in your body, they all go through phases, cycles, and transitions. Everything is always in transit to the next thing, and full circle again. And when we understand these processes, we can become active participants, go beyond holistic, and really participate in that transmutational process. And that is when humanity, mankind, we should say, is really going to get somewhere and be where we're supposed to. Well, actually be where we're at right now, but there's just certain forces, of course, that are convincing us that we're somewhere else.
So I guess expanding on the topic of freedom, then, and Saint Germain and secret societies, we know that America, the Freemasons had a hand in the founding with the Boston Tea Party and that whole thing. Is there, like, America is different in the way, especially with everything going on now. Like, it seems like the Constitution is the only legal document that provides a lawful way for us to get out from underneath the boot. Does that make sense? And so I guess my question is, like, is the founding of the way that this country was structured and the fact that it has ties back to these mystical orders, like, that was done on purpose, right? Like, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. Well, going back to Saint Germain, number one, he was a mysterious stranger that appeared in the closed, locked chambers amongst the original signers of the Declaration of Independence, because they were suffering great anxiety for signing that, because they knew they'd be greatly affected, persecuted, maybe lose their lives even, at very least lose their fortunes and everything they'd built in this country in the first place. Saint Germain appeared to them. And, that can be found in the Congressional Library. So this isn't, again, some New Age book or something. And you can even read the words he said, which basically lit a fire under everybody. And then they signed it immediately. And George Washington has a long history, you learn in the Saint Germain Foundation, with Saint Germain. They had many embodiments together and had a great role to play with each other. And when you learn more about George Washington, which, of course, these are the reasons why the communist agenda, which is exactly what it is now, is just what's going on. The coup in our country right now, they're constantly trying to defamate, all of the original founders and find, certain things to denigrate them by. Because, people like George Washington were of a very high level of consciousness and stature. They were deists. They understood a lot of what we're talking about. And then, of course, people say, oh my God, they're Masons, they're all in on it. Well, the original Masonic temples, like anything, they weren't bad at their inception, but they were infiltrated, and truth is always inverted by we'll call it the Aromatic forces, and then weaponized against us. And the original Masonic temple teachings were about helping us understand that the temple that they were referring to in the first place was our body, and how our body could be perfected into a capacitor to manifest heaven on earth. That's the whole purpose for embodiment in the first place. Otherwise, why would we even take on a body? And so anyway, going back to George Washington, he had 3 visions. Also, you can look this up in a congressional library and a full account of it. And he had what he described as a cosmic being that appeared to him. And these visions were all documented at the time. And the first 2 visions all graphically depicted different things that happened historically, over the last couple hundred years. Things like the Civil War, everything down to the detail, they all came true. Now, the third vision, where the cosmic being said, these do not have to come to pass. And it explained how, for the first time, America, and they always looked at America as the 3 Americas. It wasn't just, our little section with political boundaries. But America, for the first time, would be invaded on our own borders. And it explains exactly what's happening now, when you look at what's happening in the news cycle, verbatim. However, the plans that they call the Sinister Force had to bring America into ruination, because the whole purpose, Saint Germain oversaw the project of the United States in the first place, was to return it full circle to when mankind first appeared on this planet as ascended masters from the get-go, but then in the devolution process, here to full circle. But America literally means ascended master nation. That's why there's so much focus on destroying this nation right now. So there are certain activities that I was actually participating in for many years that dissipated a lot of this energy, so that World War III, which we've been in for a long time, was then kind of discharged in a way so it would occur over a longer period of time, with less possibility of an explosive event that would just, crumble the whole thing. But we still have, some choices to make here in order to mitigate some of the destruction and confusion. But as Saint Germain said, he never would have conceived or attempted this project in the first place unless he knew that victory was already attained. Just a quick comment about the Constitution. It really has nothing to do with us. It's an amazing document. There's a lot of principles that, or elements that were added by the Native American nations that Benjamin Franklin and other of the originators, spent much time, with those elders in order to put on the finishing touches of this document. But the Constitution does not confer us rights. We already have them. Declaration of Independence was, very critical, because it was our statement of, okay, stop it. That was our thing. The Constitution was putting a cyclone fence around the District of Columbia and saying, you do not dare step 1 foot outside of this 10 square mile vicinity. It's none of your business. So the real thing we should appreciate about the Constitution is it keeps government, the federal government, out of our affairs. And of course, the federal government has gone to great lengths to get its nose under the tent in all of our business. And one of the things it did is it parceled off that jurisdiction into many locations around the country, so that technically it fragmented DC into different centers that so-called give them jurisdiction, in different locations. That's a lost piece of understanding that even a lot of our legal researchers, don't talk about much these days. So they've played every trick in the book, but the Constitution is divinely inspired. There's, native wisdom there, and it does prevent the people, in the federal government from, being in our business at all. The other thing you have to understand about the Constitution, if you understand the word, and the people that create a constitution, they're called constitutors. And a constitutor is somebody who abrogates the debt from one party onto another party. And after the Revolutionary War, we were funded by the Rothschilds by way of Lafayette in France, but it was Rothschild money. And of course, they make their business to fund both sides of every war. That's how they profit. So there was a great debt owed to the city of London after the war. And the founding fathers, forming the new country, they came to the colonies and requested that they share the burden of the debt. The colonists said, hell no. And so they created the Constitution, which took that debt and again shifted it to a corporation called US Inc. And that's gone through many, morphological, changes. And then that was a bankruptcy. And in the case of nation states, rather than a 7-year period like it is if you and I declare bankruptcy, it's 70 years. And so that gave them 70 years to make good on the debt. And then 7 years later, they still didn't make good on the debt. So they needed to put up another surety for the city of London so that they would carry the debt another 70 years. The city of London demanded it. The British Empire never released control of this country ever. And that brought us right to the time of the Civil War. And that's why the Civil War really had nothing to do with slavery. It was about the war of northern aggression, because under the guise, the false flag of, human rights, they went and stole the agrarian lands of the left, gave it over to the, the bankers, the city of London, to carry our debt for another 7 years. And sorry to close this up real quick, the next 70 years brought us right to the time when the Federal Reserve Bank got its final and third foothold into this country in 1913, and then led them to control enough of our financial systems that they pulled the rug out in 1929 in order to send, shoot a shot across the bow of anybody in Congress that still might have some patriotic leanings, just to show them that they could take us down at any time through the financial system. And then in 1998, the bankruptcy was over, and they've been doing other shenanigans behind the scene in order to maintain control. But in 1998, we should have been a done deal and free from that whole debt in the first place, even though it wasn't ours in the first place. Sorry, that became long-winded.
No, thank you so much for sharing. 98, that's just a little bit before 9/11, 2001, right? Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next question. What rule do you have for yourself that you break, and why do you think that it's important?
Oh boy, what rule do I break or not break?
That you never break.
Oh, okay. All right. I have a lot of rules I break all the time. Not break. Yeah, I have to think about that. But, the first thing that comes to mind is I've just never, it's funny, because I've been in combative sports my whole life and kind of lived a lifestyle that was never shied away from confrontation. But I'd say I just would never harm any other part of life. And even when I'm in the martial arts ring, I used to do full contact and, tournament stuff. But it wasn't about hurting anybody. I just can't do it. I stopped. I became a vegetarian right after I quit football. I just kind of and never even ate kind of mammal meat even growing up. I just kind of something didn't feel good about it. And even when I was a pretty bulked up football player, I did it in other ways and then just kind of remained a vegetarian. But anyway, that was just sort of congruous about I just can't hurt birds and animals. I just and especially other people, which is one of the things that I think that led me into my vocation in medicine, just trying to help people more than anything else, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, if we look at the world as a mirror, like we're reflections of what the mirror is reflecting what we see ourselves as. So if like the golden rule, don't do harm because you don't want harm to be done to you, right? So perfect. I love it.
Good. Yeah, so that's a short answer, and I don't proselytize at all, about how people should eat. And even when I was practicing, some people would gravitate into a vegan thing because it was more of an ideological choice, and maybe their bodies hadn't had time to accommodate, building up their enzyme systems and emotional attachments that were born of a lifetime of eating some in a certain way, and then they just made a radical change, then they had a very hard time thriving. So I would try to get people more into a transition. And sometimes that meant going back on a lot of, some animal foods and things until they could, be where they're trying to be right off the bat. So, I don't believe in, there's good or bad. It's just, I'm just explaining for whatever reason, it's the way I was, from very early on in my life, even though I was in a lifestyle where I was mostly surrounded by a lot of carnivores. Let's just say that.
Yeah, diet is becoming more and more of a hot button issue, I think, just because of the way that the predicament that Western medicine has put us into right now. Like if we don't pay for our I saw a meme going around the other day, and it said something along the lines of, if you don't pay for your health now, you will pay for it later. As in, like, if you don't pay attention to, like, okay, so I'm not going to go there.
You may not want to bring me there either.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just important to watch what you put in your body, especially with, I'll just say, the advent or the rise of nanotechnology and genetically modified organisms. Like, it's important.
Yeah, a quick comment, what you're alluding to there, a lot of, I spent many, many years looking at thousands of blood slides and, to this day still see things that are in people's blood from some of the things you're talking about. And it's disturbing. It's greatly disturbing to see what's happening inside people's bodies, especially folks that make very poor decisions about taking certain medicines, we'll say.
And just as a side note, and a thank you again, like Alfa Vedic for me is the backbone of all the supplements that I take, right? So, and if it wasn't for you guys and what you do, like I wouldn't be able to have as healthy of a temple as I have right now. I mean, I've done my own share of work, quitting alcohol and eating, changing my diet, fixing my gut and everything. But really, spending money and investing on your health through a company, with a company like Alfa Vedic, joining the co-op is just so important, because now the game's not only and I say the game, right? Or simulation, right? The game is not only to stay out of jail, right? We have to stay out of quote unquote health offices or whatever, right? So if we can take care of ourselves and take personal responsibility and, not rely on other people for these things, and that's a step towards freedom. And in my opinion, Alfa Vedic helps you take that if you're willing to put in, the other half of the effort to get there. So I just wanted to say thank you for helping people along that path, because you helped me immensely. So.
Well, thanks. It makes our efforts appreciated. So, it makes it all worthwhile. So thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Question 5. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Well, it's easy to know who my best friend is. She's endured me for about 46 years now. So, she's told me a long time, and I'm starting to get the knack of it. When you're in my business, you tend to be that caretaker archetype. And sometimes you take it upon yourself to try to fix things that are none of your business. And, even after years of being in it, even though I'm not in practice anymore, that tendency kind of lingers where, you could rationalize it as good intentions and everything. But also, you have to understand that there's, all archetypes have their positive attributes and their challenges at the same time. And the caretakers is the same. So sometimes you just have to back off. And what she's always, said, Barry, you can't fix everybody. So, just let it be. So I'd say that would be the answer.
You can't save them all, so to speak, right? Like my fiance, God bless her heart, she's got a huge one, but she's got a passion for animals, right? And so every time she sees one in distress, we want to come and take it home and take care of it, right? So I get where you're coming from. I think, right?
Yeah. And really not trying to paint a picture of, pretentiously paint a picture of anything other than just it's just a tendency, and it is an archetype, and a lot of people, I think, that chose the healing arts as a vocation, would probably fall into that a bit.
Well, I would, consider myself that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, volunteering to do this podcast, right? Help people. And I have that kind of in my bio and on the website is about helping people. And it's interesting on that note. It's something I read in reality transurfing recently, was that altruism actually derives from the mind and the ego, whereas when you express compassion or charity towards somebody, that is heart driven, right? And it's something that I've never really put two and two together. Like, I've always thought altruism was kind of like agape, right? And it's not. It's ego. So I don't know, it's just something interesting I wanted to.
No, I think that's well said. I think there's definite truth to that.
All right. Question number 6. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I would say being in nature. And that, as a kid, I grew up in that kind of natural surrounding. And in childhood, I would go off alone quite a bit. And, done that my whole life. And also why I choose this lifestyle now is because, we can shut off everything, whenever we want. We're just surrounded by nature here. So, we do a lot of creative things, in business and produce a lot of things. So we're very active in the outer world, but I've done a lot of school as well, and created medical systems actually that have been adapted by other groups, in the healing arts. But I never really think about things. when I go out in nature, I just automatically, I don't even have to try. Everything just shuts off, and that's when things just occur. And that's always been the source of, we're talking about that expansion in the heart center that just, without even trying, it just happens. And then also all these insights come and solutions and things that, you probably wouldn't be able to think up, even if you tried otherwise. But yeah, when I'm in nature, I'm fine. When I go in cities, I have fun in other ways. I spend very little time, in cities. But it seems very lonely when, I'm in that kind of urban environment. And that's why I've always gravitated towards solo sports, and why I quit football, after college, is because I just wanted to do sports and things that, allowed me to integrate more with nature and just be by myself. That's why, I had a lifelong passion for surfing as well. And, you're out in the ocean, and it's just very peaceful. I would say that's when I'm the happiest.
Yeah, I've found enjoyment in that more so recently because I moved states. I moved from Indiana to Michigan, and I'm surrounded by forests, right? So I'm in the hills a little bit. And I've also been experimenting with cacao, pure ceremonial cacao. I get it from Aura Cacao, who the founder hopefully will have on the show soon. But and I wanted to share this with you because there are legends, stories, traditions say that there's a spirit that goes with cacao plant, and so it helps you on more than just the physical level, but on the 3D level. What I'm experiencing when I do cacao ceremonially is it because of the theobromine, which is the whatever chemical in there, right? It's if I understand it correctly, is a cardiovascular stimulant. As opposed to like caffeine in coffee, which is a nervous system stimulant. And so like when I'm out there, doing forest things, because, ripping down vines and just taking care of the forest and learning as I go, I notice that I feel more connected to nature after ingesting the cacao. So curious, do you have any experience with cacao or anything along those lines?
Yeah, cacao is, it's considered a sacred substance by the Mayan and Incan civilizations. And, they called it liquid gold. And, it's a very special plant, and it's a stimulant, but it doesn't jack your adrenals up in the same way as other forms of caffeine. There's 3 different types of caffeine. Theobromine is one that you mentioned. The other 2, one is more unique to tea, mate. The other one is coffee. And they're all a little bit different. But the theobromine also has an effect, if I'm not mistaken, on serotonin levels. So it's more balanced as far as, it's a central nervous system stimulant, but it also, that's why you kind of get those kind of feel good vibes in other ways. And which of course is good news to me, because I've always, chocolate's always been kind of my drug of choice. But yeah, and it's just great. David Avocado Wolf was awesome because he kind of brought raw chocolate or raw cacao to the forefront, long ago. And I remember reading his book years back, and he kind of gave me permission to eat cacao and kind of rediscover it. And like you're talking about, really get into its other attributes and not just, that it tastes good. And yeah, absolutely one of those special substances on the planet.
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoyed. I actually had some today. I keep a journal. I had some at 11:03 a.m. this morning. It was sunny and cold out, in case anybody was wondering. But that's something that I guess I wanted to share with you, just to get your opinion, but also with the listeners, because it's such a great thing to do, especially if you can pair it with like a little ceremony, like a gratitude ceremony, right? So I wanted to share that. Thank you. Question number 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
This will sound kind of stupid, but it's the first thing that comes to mind. I was in a college football game. This is going to sound very trite, but you have to get in the mindset of an athlete. And okay, I'm on the field and we had a change in defense and it came at the last minute. I had to run off the field real quick and we were in a formation way over on the opposite sideline. And I had a split second to get off before the ref threw a flag. So I had to run off in the opposite direction. So I found myself standing on the opposing sideline with the other team. And of course, they're all giving me all sorts of crap about it. Like, you're stupid, you're on the wrong side and all that kind of thing. And it was a very intense game too. So anyway, that probably doesn't have much impact for somebody that hasn't been in that situation. You had to have been there. But yeah, that's the first thing. It was embarrassing. But I didn't know what else to do at the time. So I made a quick decision and took a little flack for it. And yeah. And the fact that I can remember it all these years later probably means I haven't gotten over it yet.
I can relate kind of. I did play 1 year of lacrosse in high school, and there's a certain point, like when the whistle blows or they're changing players or between flags, like if you don't get off the field, your team can get penalized because you've got too many men on your field, right? So I can kind of relate with that.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand too, this is being televised. It's in a stadium of over 100,000 people. So that might add a little bit more context for the moment.
Do you want to share who you played for? I don't know if you've divulged that.
Yeah, no problem. I actually, out of high school, my favorite sport was baseball. And that's my one regret in life, that I didn't continue on with baseball. I was just totally sports oriented, hated school, went out of my way, to never open a book, and that changed in college. But I started getting football scholarships. So for some reason I chose football. So I had a lot of different offers all over the place, all, tier 1 schools and, national contenders. I ended up choosing Utah of all places because Utah State, at that point, they were an independent school. They weren't in a league. And they had a 10-year run as being the top independent in the country. And independents back then were Notre Dame, Air Force, Penn State. So I saw that we had a much more diverse schedule. We played Oklahoma, Nebraska, Georgia, Ole Miss, you played a lot of Southeast. So it was just more fun. And then plus they had a great ski mountain right close by there. And they also at that point I thought, okay, I'm still going to go pro. And they put in more people in my positions. I was defensive end, linebacker kind of position. And so I chose to go to Utah, and we ended up being nationally ranked and everything. So I had a good run. And now the school's much different than what it was in the program, but it was a good experience. And I also had a love-hate relationship with football the whole time. And I was pretty burnt out on it and just elected to leave after college.
Okay. Yeah. The fact that it's independent, like, it probably gave you a lot of unique opportunities to travel to different areas, because I know certain conferences are kind of geographically defined, and I grew up in South Bend, so like I had to be a Notre Dame fan, right? And they're independent.
Right.
I had to see them hop around.
Right.
So that was the same thing for you?
Exactly. I shouldn't mention this, but independence back then, we had a coach who actually became a father figure to me. Loved the guy. And he sort of took me under his wing. But anyway, he was from the pro ranks. He was offense coordinator under Hank Stram, who, went to the Super Bowl way back at the beginning of the Super Bowl years. And so he came and he was coaching us, but he ran it like a pro camp, which is another reason why I chose it. It wasn't this abusive, typical old school college coach that's always berating you and everything. In fact, you'd have one of the assistants every so often would go off on you, and Chuck would come over and say, "Hey, that's somebody's kid there. You treat them with respect." So it's like real different. And that's why I love the man. And that's why I played for him. And anyway, he was kind of like the Oakland Raiders, the old Oakland Raiders of college. He would get all these people that were amazing athletes in all top programs, but for some reason, maybe got in trouble with the law or didn't make grades somewhere, or just, were troublemakers in one way or the other. So he kind of got us all together and just treated us like adults, and we had a very successful program. And also there's, back in those days, there's a little bit more stuff going on behind the scenes that would get programs quickly disqualified for a good number of years if they found about it today, so I liked the fact that it was a little bit outlaw and gave us certain freedoms that wouldn't be allowed if I was in a league. We'll just say that, because I had scholarships to the old Pac-8, and, on the West Coast and other places. And it just didn't seem as much fun. It was too controlled.
Yeah, we don't like control, do we?
No.
All right. Question number 8. What is your greatest fear, and how did you overcome it, if you have?
I'd say, embarrassing myself. And, I chose to be putting myself out there quite a bit in competition, and sports was, pretty much my whole focus, a good part of my life. And, going into the ring, fighting or football game, I was never afraid of anything else other than embarrassing myself in front of everybody, but I kept putting myself there. Same thing. I remember when I first started, I had a little stint where I was teaching in college for a while, and, you go in front of a big audience, and I kept getting in these situations where I had to realize my most fears or my worst fears, which was just, making a fool out of myself in public. So again, first thing that comes to mind, if I'm honest, I think that's it.
I think it's something, I struggle with that too. Going through this reality transurfing book, it talks about how in order to find confidence, you have to stop looking for it, right? And kind of act like you already have it, and that will be reflected to you in the outside world. So, yeah. And so translate that to embarrassing. It's
yeah. And I think the biggest thing was just, I didn't like being afraid of anything. So I tended to just go for it and just deal with it. Not saying that's good or bad, but that was just my way of dealing with it.
Well, it's always better to act than do nothing, right?
Yeah. And, that also went into later life when I started taking government agencies on, and, I had FBI knocking on my door and hauling me into, offices and little cubicles and holding me. And, because we were daring to poke the beast. And, this was before internet, long before people were understanding all these legal processes. And I was in some of those pioneering groups where we're just figuring it out on the fly. And then we'd go in there and take agencies and bureaucracies on just to test to see, what we were learning was true. And boy, we had some real hairy experiences. I had, good friends that died. They attacked me, targeted me greatly, and took every penny I had when I was about 50 years old, whole life worth. And so, we stuck our necks out, and, but for some reason, it just seemed like it was worth it because we really wanted to figure out what's going on here.
You mentioned poking the beast, and sorry, I keep tying it back to reality transurfing, but um, he called that would be a way of responding inadequately to a pendulum. So you're not following the rules that the pendulum would like you to follow because it wants your energy, right? So in order to respond inadequately to a situation allows us to kind of break free of the pendulum's control. And I guess this is kind of what I was alluding to, like back in when I lost my train of thought back in the first answer, of how breaking pendulums, responding inadequately as in relation to the expected behavior that the pendulum wants you to adhere to. I mentioned that Darren traveling back and forth between Canada and US is kind of, and of course, everything going on in Canada right now, drawing attention towards that. And I had mentioned also that I'd kind of taken, or I'd kind of looked into Falun Gong and how their three tenets were truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And so I think that with the genocide going on over in China with the practitioners of Falun Gong, it is this would be an example of responding in an inadequate way to that pendulum, because obviously China does not want people's attention drawn to this subject because it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible, right? It's horrifying. It's horrible. So I think, in order to like stir the pot so much, so to speak, I think that, talking about these things is a way of responding inadequately, and also maybe inspiring people to if not take action, to maybe rethink and respect some other, re-look at some things in their own life, or look at events through a different lens, maybe, possibly. So that is what Poke the Beast made me think of.
No, agreed. And, I would just add to that you don't even have to go to China. What I witnessed firsthand going on in this country, just horrible atrocities, unspeakable things. And, some of them came pretty close to home. A lot of these things are starting to come out in the open, which is very gratifying. And but some of us that went through those early trials, didn't make it out alive or on the other end. So it was serious business. And I think, I really believe this is the time of revelation, not in the traditional biblical sense, but kind of really, and that there's no more secrets. And a lot of these things are becoming known. And of course, there's great attempts just to gaslight, the people that do know, but it's all crumbling. And again, this is the age of transmutation. So we have to take all of these things that we have allowed to occur, and we've allowed it, not trying to find fault with anybody, but we didn't mind the store. And so all these things have to be brought to light so that we can purify and raise them and go on to the next experience. And so we're gonna see some stuff here that is going to, even amongst people that are aware of a lot of these things, we're going to see things in these next months that are going to be astounding.
The Masons like to say bringing from darkness to light, right? So we're imparting knowledge. And so it was just exactly what I would hope to think that 13 Questions is doing. And I know that Alfa Vedic does it. So like what you're doing, I wouldn't be at the spot I'm at right now if I hadn't been listening to Alpha Cast and taking, your supplements and all that stuff. So yeah, this next question.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Question number 9. What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is freedom. And I have a deep commitment to seeing this country not just survive, but achieve its destiny. And I've been fortunate to be in circles, still am, have been for a long time, with people that are equally as committed and willing to do anything to further the cause. So, and then of course it gets back to the, my family background. We didn't come over with the Mayflower. I grew up with broken English and, came from a different culture. And, my grandparents, so I'm second generation, but they came here to escape fascism. One, set came from Peru, and there's stuff going on down there. And then my dad's side from Italy. So, but the reason was the same. And when they got here, and of course at that time, they had an opportunity that they couldn't believe was possible. And so they were great patriots. They were more than happy to assimilate and love this country for what it afforded them. And in a single generation, they were wildly successful and did well. I got to benefit from that. So I think I'm a chip off that block. And another thing, since I've been around a few years, I'm in my 70s now, which I don't consider that old, but, it does give you a little bit of a different context. When I think of the majority of my childhood, back in the 50s, you wouldn't even resemble what life was like back then, or you'd be amazed that life back then didn't even resemble what life is today. And I look at kids growing up in today's America, and I really feel bad for them. They're missing out on so much. And I really, things were well in the works in the 40s and 50s, as far as what was going on behind the scenes already. But people were still not in any way ready to be tolerant of the sort of things that we're tolerating now. And so they had to go lightly. And because of that, I enjoyed, I think, the last, little tail end of the American culture and freedom. And it was wonderful. It was really great. Now, we were country kids. We didn't have a lot. It wasn't back then about having stuff in the first place. But, life was very sweet. There was a true sense of freedom. And so when you stay conscious during that whole timeline, and, we started noticing pretty early on how they're ratcheting things up, and all the way to present time where I can't even believe my eyes anymore. And what's more amazing is that people are actually putting up with it. So when you have that history of enjoying some freedom and then having it taken away, like our podcast, we just got a strike the other day, so we can't, go on YouTube. This coming week, just censorship. It's like, really? And then, what's most disturbing is, sorry, I don't mean to rant, but seeing my countrymen not just tolerate it, but actually become the new generation of brown shirts. And they're clearly on the wrong side of history. And it's just, I can't believe that they would actually participate and side against their own countrymen. That's something I read in books when I was a kid, about communism and the old Soviet Union and those kinds of places. But, it can't happen in America. We were just taught, no, we're free here. Well, we're not free here. We haven't been free for a long time. So freedom is that's my hot button.
And I agree. So, with regards to the people that are close to us, and we see them becoming the brown shirts, as you aptly describe it, the challenging part that I'm finding as I'm learning about all this stuff that we've talked about so far is that we have to let them be who they are, even though we know that it's wrong. Like, is that an appropriate? I don't know. Am I getting that right, Dr. Bear?
Well, I think that's another reason why we play the game. It's mastery training, because on one hand, yeah, we're tolerant and we have to allow, we don't have to, but I think that's the training is, allowing them to have their experience, but then simultaneously drawing our line in the sand and saying, no, you will not encroach on me. So that's the point where we're at right now. And, you mentioned early on in the discussion about the male polarity. And of course, there's been great effort to make the male polarity, even though it's one half of nature, we couldn't have the simulation without it. Now, all of a sudden, it's bad, it's toxic. And we have two different male role models in our society now. On one hand, we have the adult males that are wearing jerseys with some other guy's name on the back while they're drinking beer, watching a game. And then the other half are these kind of effeminate beta males that are asking women how they should behave. In indigenous cultures, and I just have to default back to that. And I do come from a different culture, so I got a little bit of that. And also this other gentleman that took me under his wing that I was, referring to, who came from a Native American culture. The male was much appreciated and understood in a different light. And, males had rites of passage. I made my own rites of passage with all the experiences I chose. But men were warriors. But part of being a warrior was facing yourself and introspecting at a very deep level, not to equate maleness with this machismo kind of attitude or wearing a football jersey or something, but a true warrior that would face fears, go out in the center of battle, but at the same time be very much in tune with that other half of themselves. And that doesn't mean being feminine, but it does mean confronting all of their feelings and being comfortable with it, and losing that tendency to be aggressive, because, I think a truly balanced male fulfills what the biological mission of the male polarity is, which is the outer protective shell so that the inner yin can then use life force to regenerate new life. And if you just look at biology, everything becomes crystal clear. And I don't believe males at present time are doing their job.
Yeah, the topic of masculinity is certainly a third rail, and something that I've found doing 13 questions is the issue of vulnerability often comes up. And from my own experience and from what I'm gathering talking to other people is that males often have an issue with being vulnerable. And I hope that by doing this podcast that we provide a space where people can enter, introspect themselves and kind of take that, like you were saying, that warrior attitude and that spirit and do the inner work. So that way, we can have that positive impact with our outer work. So that's what I hope 13 Questions is doing. So, so I thank you for sharing, because it's kind of what I needed to hear. All right. Question number 10. Who are or were your role models and why?
Well, I had a lot of role models at different phases of life. Again, this is going to sound superficial again, but the first one that comes to mind, because I was always more in my body and visceral, was never prone to overanalyzing. I was just I think it was good in my vocation later on too, because somebody would come in, I could feel exactly what's going on in their body and feel it in my body, before they even open up their mouth. So I just had that inclination to use my body as, my connection. So my role model, I would say to a good deal this day, was Willie Mays. And Willie Mays is an athlete from a different era. He was the greatest athlete that's ever lived, in my opinion. He played for the San Francisco Giants. And as a young child, he was amazing. Just watching him, he was poetry in motion. And in my baseball years, and I could have gone on and played at a high level there and played farm club kind of level for a little bit there. And my greatest joy is, is for the San Francisco Giants. They were sponsoring this summer league for all stars in high school, and then some of their farm club players. And I got to wear Willie Mays's old jersey, that whole summer, number 24. But Willie Mays, of course, it was a different time. Now we're in the 50s, and he was very soft-spoken, not at all boisterous like a lot of athletes are today. He exemplified just class. And to watch him move, I modeled my whole athletic career around how he moved. And, when I look at an athlete, and again, this is maybe not going to mean much to other people, but people that can move with that fluidity and that level of skill, and I kind of perfected all of his mannerisms with the casual basket catch, and and his athleticism was off the charts. But to me, it really outpictured a deeper level of connection with spirit, because when you're in that frame of mind where your body is that connected with its surroundings and able to move that effortlessly and really impose your will upon, what we think of as gravitational forces and so forth, and just pull off some of those things. It goes beyond intellect or mind. And, that's why I was related to athletes more than later on in life when I was with, in medical school and professors and, getting into academia that I just thought were kind of stuffed shirts full of themselves. And so, so I always gravitate back to those kind of folks. And Willie Mays was, he was my role model. And I read one book my entire 12 years pre-college. And it was his autobiography, which is the Say Hey Kid. So anyway, again, I don't know if that sounds trite to other folks, but he's the guy.
No, I don't think it's trite at all. In fact, I think it's an awesome illustration of how what somebody that is in, the flow state can do. Because, like you said, like, is he defying gravity? Like, that doesn't make sense to us right now, but when you're in that flow state and, this, I don't know why, but it just makes me think of Dune, the spice must flow, right? And but yeah, so it's just that to me is a good illustration of, a good example of what it looks like of, just coherence, I guess, and the beauty that it produces.
Just another comment in light of today's political correctiveness. Here, I'm a little kid, and like a lot of little kids, that I grew up with, our role models, we didn't see race. And when I got to the higher levels of national sports where you're playing with all the best athletes in the country, really, and all future Hall of Famers and everything, is very interracial. And, to this day, my old buddies I played with. We raised our families together, and Tongans, guys that grew up in East LA, people myself that, grandparents immigrated, and I was Latin. Race wasn't a thing. Now, obviously, every country in the world, including America, has had its, moments of, different races getting the short end of the stick. And I don't even want to get into all that because that history has been totally distorted. And, we don't like to see any of that sort of thing. On the other hand, it wasn't an issue. And, when I was in college in the 60s and, my college roommate was the president of the Black Student Union building. And, we were best buddies. We are to this day before he passed away. So all this nonsense that we're bringing, to the forefront now to try to divide us. And just, I guess the point, without going any further into that, is you take yourself back in childhood. When Willie Mays is, my hero, kids wouldn't even think of race or, went into their consciousness. You just knew men for their actions. That's what you respected. That's who you looked up to. And isn't it a sad state of affairs that they've tried to drag us into this, further state of hatred is all it is.
Yeah, Dr. King said it best. I mean, we should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And we all know who is responsible for his death. Government.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to question 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
Strength. I like strong women. Of course, my favorite is my wife of 46 years. And she's a very strong woman. Strong in that she's always supported me in everything I've always wanted to do. Had the strength to allow me the freedom to pursue anything. And also to put me in my place when I needed it. And, and also, out of that, I just learned to respect strong women. And, in younger years that, when you're going through the dating wars and everything, I don't think I ever really truly respected a woman that couldn't just really give me a run for my money. What's the fun in that? So in a partnership with a woman, I always needed an equal partner where, we had the mutual strength to allow each other and support each other and be there no matter what. And my wife is also an agent of change on this planet and doing a lot of amazing things, within our project. And we also embraced the I Am teachings together long, long ago. So, our present relationship is based on that understanding. And fortunate enough, we walked a parallel path. And I think those sorts of understandings give you an inner strength as well.
I like that you mentioned agent of change, because I'm finding in my own relationship with Ellie that a good woman will draw out of you what you need to work on and force you to work on it, to change it, to transmute it. So I love that I just love the phrase agent of change. I think that it's super appropriate, and it was able to relate it to my life, because we just had this conversation, her and I, just had this similar conversation, this week. Right. So I think that's awesome that you pointed that out.
Yeah, and she has a very sweet, loving demeanor. And then on the other hand, many men have learned firsthand, it's like, don't mess with her, So, it's perfect. It's about balance, just like men, it's about finding that balance.
Question number 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
So I guess this would be kind of a dual thing because I was involved in it. I'm going to deliberately leave out names of people and places because this was a very well publicized event that occupied the news cycle tremendously for a good number of months back in the early 90s. And another one of my mentors, in the field of law, I was already dabbling in a lot of things, and he really brought me to a lot of the material that, some of it is, being taught out there now in seminars and talked about on the internet and so forth. But he was very active in this and one of those early pioneers. And he was, him and I had a lot of adventures together. And because of his involvement of what I'm alluding to here is he had to go underground. He's clever enough legally, lawfully to get freed up for a few hours in between this legal process and arraignment. And he had to bolt because he knew they were just going to basically kill him in prison, never let him out. So he was one of the main, let's just say, counselors of a famous group of people that had a standoff going on with the federal government. And they all ended up, some of them losing their lives and then the rest just rotting in jail forever. Never having done anything wrong, but of course, they were actually standing up for their freedom. So they had to be made an example of. And it was the typical nonsense you hear in the news, where just every pejorative you can imagine is, cast in their direction so that people think they're these horrible terrorists and so forth. So where the courage comes in is my friend and how he got arrested in the first place, then finally had to become a lifelong fugitive. He went into this compound in order to help out because he felt that they were making some mistakes. He knew his life was on the line by going there, but he went there anyway. And I was involved, but more from afar. And it tested your mettle. We had some literal hair-raising experiences together in other episodes. And but then he went in and, had to pay the ultimate price. Over the years, every so often he'd turn up on my doorstep because life, that he was leading was very hard on him. So I would do things to help his body mend from the stress, and haven't seen him in a number of years now. So I don't even know if he's alive anymore, but very courageous with what he did and with what he was willing to endure and risk for the cause of freedom. And also knowing that his countrymen would vilify him. He would never receive any credit for what he was doing.
Do you think that there will ever be a point in the future where his story could be made more public so that everybody could, know what he did for them?
I'm pausing here. It might lead into another war story, but I'll keep it brief. He was in some similar circles that led me to a position overseas as a board member in a financial institution. I'm not going to give too many more details about that because a lot of people could still be harmed. My friend who is ahead of that was way up in G7 banking, and nice to meet some interesting people. They started as clients, we become friends. But anyway, this other first gentleman I'm talking about was in those similar circles. And the second one would take up another hour for me to tell you all about it. And it would also bring you into firsthand experience with certain characters that are very much behind a lot of the treachery in our country and the world right now. Very recognizable names. And the adventures in that one were so amazing. And a lot of these things that I've been involved with, I'm still amazed at, is, even looking back that, how the heck did I get in the middle of that one? But it was because of the work I did and because of the type of people that used to come see me. And then, things just, the circles got smaller. But there was actually movie rights purchased for this last adventure, which would bring in a lot of characters and tie together a lot of events. Whether that will actually materialize, I don't know. But behind the scenes, I know that happened. And some of these events also involve people that were up in different levels of intelligence at a high level. And we're realizing they didn't sign up for certain things and we're trying to do the right thing and then acting behind the scenes and, trying to change. And so anyway, that could bring in this first character I was talking about into a level of notoriety, but, we'll see. But there's a lot of, either way, there's a lot of heroes out there that will remain unsung forever. I'm sure of that.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know that it was kind of difficult. You had to dance around, some details, but yeah, just thank you. And so,
if we're ever in a private conversation, I could share more. And I don't try. I'm really not trying to be vague or mysterious. It's just it's complex.
Right. I completely understandable. And, I know that you don't have to talk about this on a podcast, which is, why I'm very appreciative that you're willing to share this with everybody. Which brings us to the capstone question, if you will. Question number 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
Well, I think it goes along with my earlier comments about really understanding what the male polarity is in the first place. And I believe we can learn a lot just by observing nature, watching biology and all the natural processes as they occur, in natural settings. There's very obvious polarities that have very definite roles. And then when you, extrapolate that to, the human experience, then things become crystal clear. So I think it really gets back again to us doing our job, which is to create the space that, these days I think they call it the safe space, but, a genuine space, holding that and holding it as a sacred space so that the other polarity can do its job. In Chinese medicine, we call the male polarity Wei Qi. It's that outer protective barrier that is not only the biological barrier but extends into the etheric around it, that is a protective shield, that is our true immunity. Immunity, as we think of it in our medical studies, is really a misnomer because biology is not a battlefield. Everything is a very cooperative, intelligent, symbiotic design. But as individuals, our real immunity is about that protective barrier that will not allow somebody to impose their will on us. So I think more simply put is the male polarity is about creating that protection so that the circumstances and collective that we're part of do not have their free will imposed on, and therefore safeguard the expansion of consciousness within the entire collective.
That is an amazing answer. Creating a space, a sacred space, so that the other polarity can do its job. I mean, to me, that just speaks of like what we talked about earlier, co-creating, like creation, right? Like, and then you said that, just by observing nature, like this fact should be, I mean, this should be a pretty clear question, right? Like what does it mean to be a man in today's, what does it mean to be a man, right? Like, but yet this society and this culture has necessitated the need to have these conversations to tell other people what it really is. So it's just, thank you for saying that, this is observable, it is in nature, it is not complicated, and it entails cooperation with the other side of the energy spectrum, the female energy. So I just think that's beautiful. That's awesome. Does that sound right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And, just another comment is that, we're talking about life that I experienced, decades ago when the country was different. Men, women, girls, boys, we actually had fun with each other. There wasn't one sex preying on the other. I mean, stuff happens and there's certain tendencies, but 99% of the time, we just had a good time. We had fun. There was friendly banters. Both sides enjoyed it just as much. It wasn't just all sexual or one, filling the needs of, at the expense of the other. It was fun. And nobody was walking on eggshells. And it was just a natural process. And, now, all that's changed. It doesn't have to. And I really believe it's going to go full circle back in an even more elevated way, because that's just the way things work. But, all this stuff that we're experiencing out there is, it's an illness. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And I hope that, this conversation, anybody that listens to it, hope that you find there's some practical pearl of wisdom that you can take away and apply to your own personal situation to help improve, like we were saying, the inner world, so that we can have a positive impact on the outer world. And with that, Dr. Bear, we haven't done this in a while, a few episodes, I should say, but sometimes we do have some bonus questions. And I think that Adam had one that he wanted to ask you. So if you, I don't know, if you have time, I think he had at least you wanted to add.
What do you hope people will say at your funeral?
My funeral, that's funny. Well, I won't be there myself. So for the folks that might be there, I hope they I hope they just remember the funny moments. My pastime within, my closer ranks of friends and growing up from day one was always known as kind of a prankster. And I've gone to many elaborate lengths to pull things over on people. So I hope they just remember some of those kind of funnier moments, because that's really what makes me tick, as I get the most kick out of just having a good laugh. And to this day, and my brothers, we kind of grew up, we're all sort of the same. We're kind of troublemakers in a way, and just always enjoyed, not doing mean things, but just, creating elaborate tricks and things that going any length to get a good laugh. So I hope it's all about that. And the only thing I'd add to that, as I'm just kind of thinking a little more, it really has nothing to do with achievements or anything, because I just believe I've had my experiences and done what I've done because it's the things I've needed to learn. And so I don't look at life as, leaving this legacy of, self-import or anything other than just how many people did you make smile while you were around?
Well, that's kind of, I keep bringing it back, but I am, you don't want to make yourself sad. You want to smile, bring light into the world. And the more light there is, then darkness just doesn't exist.
Agreed. Dr. Barre, thank you so much for spending almost 2 hours, over 2 hours with us. Before we let you go, please let the listeners know about Alfa Vedic or how they can get in touch with you. Plug whatever you would like to plug.
Sure. We're at alfavedic.com. That's ALFAVEDIC.com. And we are a permaculture farm. Our specialty is medicinal herbs. We do make some products out of the herbs we grow, and then we make other things. And since we're a permaculture operation, the whole concept is to create a prototype of self-sufficiency. That's kind of overused these days, so that we can decentralize farming, medicine, and all of our essentials out of the hands of, the corporate controllers, for lack of a better term, and have each community, self-reliant. And every community, we believe, should have a multitude of different farms and different needs met by the people within that community who know their needs best. And we are a prototype for the 5-10 acre little niche farm, to achieve that decentralization. We're part of a larger foundation that's based on 7 generational principles. So just like in our agriculture, we're not just growing things, we're creating topsoil at the same time, for future generations. We're also improving the ecology in the process and not taking from it. And our whole specialty is farms to pharmacy. And a lot of what I grow also goes into the alchemy lab to create very special medicines that have to be in very small batches. So it's really not available on our website, but the website does make things available that then complete the circle of commerce to refund the whole farming operation. And it's just part of a complete circle. So I really want to get the concept that commerce should be part of the natural order and not just to serve a pecuniary interest, but to close the whole loop and make it self-sufficient.
Yeah, that is amazing. I as you know, I'm a part of the co-op. I wholeheartedly support Alfa Vedic. So, listener, I highly encourage you to do that. Also, and with that, Adam, do you have any parting thoughts?
No, I just think it's a beautiful thing, the entire conversation, that entire concept, the value for value, the I am. I love just the oneness that it all kind of has. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Barre, would you agree that I guess the system as we know it is crumbling, so whatever is left afterwards, after it falls, is whatever we create. So this is why it is important to support independent content creators or joining co-ops like Alfa Vedic, because these are projects that are being built, from the heart space, and these aren't going to go anywhere.
Yes. And the system was the system was designed to crumble, and of course bring us around to further control. But what all of us are doing just by getting together today, you take all these little podcasts and add them up, some very large, we're crushing it. Way more people are, tuning in compared to a relative fraction of people that are tuning into the other stuff that are, still trying to gaslight what we're doing. And what we're doing is creating parallel systems of media, of agriculture, of medicine, finance, communication. We've got some special things going on in the world of technology with my partner, where, our website's going to be going on its own server pretty soon, so we don't have to worry about FluffTube anymore. And so, it's happening. So as the crumble becomes more apparent to the folks that aren't aware yet, we will hopefully be creating for all of us a softer landing spot and a place where we can create anew. We just aren't waiting for the whole thing to come down. We've been working on it for a long time.
When the forest burns down, it looks like devastation, but everything grows up stronger with new things. So,
Thank you.
It's the idea of the caterpillar that, it turns into this one phase in between. And if you were to open it up and look inside, it's just a bunch of goo and glop, and there's no cohesiveness, and you wouldn't see any structure there. But alas, that unorganized mess is going to become a butterfly. So, I like to think of us in that same spot, that same pendulum swing. Everything's in evolution continually. And when you frame things like that, you can't see the forest from the trees, but rest assured, it can only get better.
Couldn't agree more. And gentlemen, it's been delightful to talk to you today. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you, and I hope I said something of worth to your audience here. But thanks. And Bill, I look forward to connecting more with you in the future, and you as well, Adam. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bear. We'll definitely like to connect with you later on.
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Why? I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I don't wanna Hawaii.
Why is there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't wanna Hawaii. Haya wana hawene yowa. Haya wana hawene. Haya wana hawene yowa.
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.